Deep dives and blue skies. Welcome back to Talking Blue with Nick, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Blue, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you could find. I am your host, Nick. You are listening to episode 101 of Talking Blue. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Today we're here to recap the Dodgers and the Phillies. Just wrapped up a couple hours ago. The Dodgers take 2 of 3 from the Phillies. Pretty good series overall. They end the month of June winning 14 of their last 17. They are playing pretty well right now. If it wasn't for basically one bad inning in this series, they would have walked away with a pretty easy sweep over the Phillies, who are, pretty much a perennial playoff team at this point. I know they've gotten off to kind of like a slow start by their standards in 2026, but still pretty good team. So we're going to talk a lot about Justin Wrobleski, Roki, Sasaki, Yamamoto, basically the 3 starters in this series, all pitched pretty well. A couple guys at the bottom of the order hit pretty well. A couple guys, a little bit of some roster changes. We're going to talk about all that. Actually should be a pretty quick pod. And, like I said, closing out the month of May, looking ahead to June, which will be tomorrow. June 1st will be Monday tomorrow. So, as always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the videos dropping. You can follow us on all social media at Talkin' Blue Pod. That is Instagram, TikTok, and X. And you can also follow myself at Nick Talkin' Ball on X. All right, quickly, some injury/roster stuff before we get started. Teoscar Hernandez, it's come out, we already knew it was a hamstring issue, but basically is expected to miss like roughly a month. I would imagine by the time 4th of July rolls around, Teoscar Hernandez will be back in the lineup. Tyler Glasnow, all right, he has resumed playing catch, but is yet to get over the hump in his progression. Not really sure what that means. I'm guessing there are some little hiccups and setbacks that have happened with him throwing. Probably just doesn't feel like 100% yet, and the Dodgers are basically saying to themselves, no need to rush him back. Tom Edman has been playing a few games down in the minor leagues, rehabbing. He actually hit a home run today, so that's pretty good. Again, probably some point mid-June is where we could start to expect him. Evan Phillips has continued to throw to hitters and is pretty close to going on a rehab assignment, so probably a couple weeks away from getting him back. And then the last thing, Alex Freeland, he was recalled and brought up, and Hae-Sung Kim was the one sent down. If you actually paid attention to Twitter a couple days ago when Kike Hernandez got injured, it was reported that Freeland was going to come up as the roster switch for that injury, but it was also mentioned that Freeland was actually en route because he was basically coming for Hae-Sung Kim's job. So it was kind of like before the Kike injury happened, they were already set on bringing Freeland back up and sending Kim down. I've always said this, probably since last year. I know at the very least since the very beginning of this 2026 season, back in February when we started talking about spring training stuff. I always said that I feel if the Dodgers were honest, they have more belief in Alex Freeland. I actually think that they believe Freeland can be a very, very good major league player. Not like a superstar, of course. You always got to temper your expectations, but like a very good second baseman that can hit, a little bit of pop, switch hitter, who can play really, really good defense, get on base, that kind of stuff. Kim, I think they believe, still has more just little holes in his swing. He has definitely made a lot of strides, and I do think there's a great player in there. But I just think if they're being honest, when they look at like some underlying stuff, the makeup of the swing, they kind of trust and believe more in Freeland. And, right now they're saying they're going to send Kim down to get him right and all that stuff. Again, you'll definitely see Kim at some point. Again, I don't think he's being like sent down forever, but I just think, again, Freeland went down to the minor leagues and started to crush it. Kim has been struggling really ever since the calendar turned to May. And so they made the switch. So that's pretty much that. Let's get to game 1 of this Phillies series. Dodgers-Phillies Friday night. Justin Wrobleski is taking on Zach Wheeler, who just came off the IL about a month ago or so, returned to the Phillies after having a pretty crazy health scare last year. Wasn't even really an injury. And he's come back, even though Wheeler's a little bit older now, still had like a sub-2 ERA, was looking like Injury nothing really mattered. He was back to being a very good pitcher. So you knew that the Dodgers had their hands full. In the bottom of the first inning, though, Freddie Freeman, who's actually owned Zach Wheeler in his career, and I'll get to that, he hits his 8th home run of the year to put the Dodgers up 1-0 in the bottom of the second. Another solo home run. Max Muncy, his 13th home run of the year, makes it 2-0 Dodgers. Very next inning, another solo home run. Thanks to Shohei Ohtani, his 10th home run of the year, makes it 3-0 Dodgers. Then in the 5th inning, Will Smith, his 6th home run of the year, the 4th solo home run of the game for the Dodgers, makes it 4-0. The Phillies would get on the board in the 6th inning. Kyle Schwarber, the first hit against Wrobleski, first run, his 22nd home run of the year, makes it 4-1. Phillies would get on the board in the top of the 8th inning. Stuart Barroa, not sure how to say his last name, sorry. He makes it a 4-2 game, but the Dodgers would hold on. Tanner Scott came in to get the save. Wrobleski goes 7 innings pitched. Edgardo Henriquez goes 2/3 of an inning. Vesia goes 1/3. And then Tanner Scott for 1. Like I said, he got the save. Let's talk about Justin Wrobleski, because this was not a very typical Wrobleski start that we've come to know the first 2 months plus of the season. This was actually Justin Wrobleski's best start of his big league career. All right, and this is a guy who's basically been around for almost 2 years now. All right, let me give you his final line in this game. He goes 7 innings pitched, 1 hit, which was on the home run from Kyle Schwarber, 1 earned run, 0 walks, 9 strikeouts. All right, Wrobleski, he had 16 whiffs in this game. All right, so the starting pitcher with the 3rd lowest K rate in baseball and the lowest whiff rate overall, he piled up a new career high in strikeouts and whiffs. All right, so Wrobleski, we talked about it ad nauseum all year, has pitched very, very good. But, of course, I've continued to always say that he will regress at some point. He doesn't get a ton of strikeouts or whiffs. It's just the way that he's done it this year. He's been very fortunate to have the ERA that he does have. Now, again, he does make up for those shortcomings with the swing and miss in other ways, pounding the strike zone. He does have a pretty solid fastball-slider combination. But when you consider the lack of swing and miss and actually the lack of ground balls that he's had this year, it was kind of like insane to think that he had as good of numbers as he's had. In this start, the career high in strikeouts, the career high in whiffs, he had 9 strikeouts. And like I said, he had 16 whiffs. That's very, very good. That's a good amount of swings and misses, and that's a very good amount of strikeouts. Another reason as to why that happened, his fastball velocity was up 1.2 miles an hour. He averages 93.7 on the year. It was up to 94.9. All right, just under 95 miles an hour. He actually hit 96, 97, 98 a couple times in this game, so the velocity was definitely up. 13 whiffs. 13 of those 16 whiffs were on his 4-seam fastball. A 54% whiff rate on the heater in this game. That's electric. So that 4-seam fastball was just eating up the Phillies, eating them up crazy. All right. His 4-seam fastball is the 2nd best fastball in the game according to run value. It has a 200 batting average against. He also has a slider that has a 169 batting average against. All right. Like I said, he doesn't have an elite strikeout or whiff rate, but if he can continue to add some velocity and more swing and miss, he won't have as much of a regression as I've been talking about all year. All right. This outing would definitely give Justin Wrobleski a much better shot at sustaining these numbers and the 2.87 ERA that he has. Again, I'll say this right now, and I've been saying it all year. He will not have a 2.87 ERA. He won't have a sub-3 ERA. But if he can continue to add more strikeouts and swing and miss, if you go back and look at his numbers, over his last 4, 5, 6 starts, he has increased the strikeout rate. It had been slowly increasing. A start like this really gets you excited for the possibilities that he could actually, like the strikeouts and whiffs could actually be legit because they've never been this good. The velocity, like I said, also jumping up that much. So the Phillies, for some odd reason, got eaten alive by 4-seam fastballs in the series. I'll get to it with Wrobleski, Sasaki, and Yamamoto. So I don't know if it's the Phillies. I looked into it. They actually don't have bad numbers against 4-seam fastballs. So I don't necessarily know why they got just eaten alive by heaters. Again, I'll get to the other pitchers as we go on, but so I don't know if it's the Phillies just suck against fastballs. I don't think it is because I looked into the numbers. I'm sure again him having almost a 1.5 mile increase on his velo made it kind of harder on the Phillies. They weren't expecting necessarily a mid-90s fastball. They were probably expecting more low 90s. So regardless of all that, this was very exciting and very pleasing start from Wrobleski. He was able to go up against a perennial playoff team. The Phillies are a little bit of an odd team. If you follow my other podcast, Baseball Mondays, where I talk about all things baseball, I'm a believer of the Phillies long term to make the playoffs. I pick them to win the division. I don't think that's going to happen anymore, but they've gotten back into the race. But if you really dive into their team, there's not a lot of scary things about them. I mean, their pitching is scary, considering that Christopher Sanchez, right now it's either him or Mizorowski that would win the Cy Young in the National League, and Ohtani would follow those two. They have Zach Wheeler, they have Jesus Luzardo. Like, they have a very good starting rotation and pretty good arms in the bullpen. But after Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper and a little bit of Brandon Marsh, their lineup is like kind of abysmal. You take a look up and down the OPSs of that lineup. Bryson Stott, Alec Boehm, Adolis Garcia, JT Realmuto, a lot of those guys, forget having an OPS sub 700. There's a few guys in that lineup that have a sub 600 OPS. So, if you're able to pitch around Harper and Schwarber, there's a good chance that you can beat the Phillies. So their lineup is not as scary as it has been in the past. But regardless, they are still a good team that I think will make the postseason this year, and they've been a perennial postseason team. Regardless of all that, very, very exciting, positive start from Wrobleski. Wrobleski has kind of been a guy that all year, like, the only thing I've really talked about about him is the lack of strikeouts and how it's kind of been like, he's kind of been an anomaly a little bit. A start like today or in this Friday night game, gives me a little bit more excitement about Wrobleski, that it's a little bit more legit. And, he did have very good stuff last year. For whatever reason, it dipped down this year. I shouldn't say for whatever reason, because the reason is because he's not coming out of the bullpen anymore, and he's stretched out and trying to go deeper, and he's admittedly said that he's kind of changed his style of pitching. But then he also said after this game, talking to the interviewers on Apple TV, he actually said, like, I wasn't even sure why, or maybe he didn't say I don't know why. I think he said, like, he didn't really allude to why the velocity increased. He just said, like, I've been working on things, blah, blah, blah. So maybe he worked on something specifically to have the velo jump. Whatever the case is, great start from Wrobleski, and definitely the best of this season, the best of his career. And again, considering that he hasn't gotten to strikeouts riffs all year, it was very fun to see him get those things. The last thing before we get to the second game, how about 4 home runs off of Zach Wheeler? That's pretty cool. I mean, again, Wheeler, I thought the Dodgers were going to have a good shot to put up runs against him. But, of course, anytime you go against a pitcher like that, you never know what could happen. The guy could absolutely dominate you. And they hit 4 solo home runs. Obviously, you would rather home runs with men on base, but 4 solo home runs led them to the win. And they obviously needed the home runs in 4 of them because they only had 2 more hits outside of that. So the home runs were very, very much needed. All right, Freddie Freeman. Would you actually believe that he has a 400 batting average in his career against Zach Wheeler? I actually wasn't even aware of that. So that's pretty crazy. His OPS is up to 828 on the year. Freddie Freeman was one of the better hitters in the Dodgers lineup in the month of May. Really turned things around where he kind of had a somewhat quiet first month of the year. All right, we also have, in the month of May, a .538 slugging percentage. 5 of his 8 home runs came in the month of May. So Freddie Freeman really turned it on in the month of May. Hopefully he can continue that into June, because last year, Freddie was off to a great start the first 2 months, March/April, and then May, and then where his struggles began were in June and July. So it'd be something to keep an eye on for Freddie, that he can maintain his numbers right now. All right, good to see Muncy homer after the hit by pitch scare a week ago in Milwaukee. I actually didn't realize, I'll get into this at the end of the pod, Muncy's numbers in the month of May were actually pretty quiet. I didn't realize that was he kind of quietly was not that great in the month of May, but still on the year, an .887 OPS, 25th best in Major League Baseball. He has just a sub 900 OPS. Ohtani, 10th home run of the year. His OPS is up to 895. That is 16th best. Will Smith, his OPS is up to 735. And I know that doesn't sound that impressive, but just a few games ago, it was 714. He is starting to really put the unluckiness struggles behind him. All right, so great first win. Dodgers look good. 4 home runs. Wrobleski looked good. Bullpen held it down. They get the win over the Phillies. We go to game 2. Roki Sasaki is taking on Jesus Luzardo. Okay, let's go to that game. Alec Bohm puts the Phillies on the board in the second inning, his 6th home run of the year, 1-0 Phillies. Bottom of the second, the Dodgers tie the game thanks to Alex Call, who of course is going to get a lot of playing time going forward with Teoscar Hernandez. He ties the game 1-1. Santiago Espinal, who did not clear waivers and was able to come back up to the Dodgers, with, of course, after the Kike Hernandez injury. He got the start in this game. A sac fly puts the Dodgers up 2-1. All the way to the 7th inning, Mookie Betts singles into right field, puts them up 3-1. All right. In the 8th inning, this is where things unfortunately changed. Bryce Harper, he singles off of Tanner Scott to make it a 3-2 game. Then the biggest swing for the Phillies in this series and in this game, 2-run homer off of the bat of Edmundo Sousa. His 3rd home run of the year jumps the Phillies on top. They now lead 4-3, and they actually hold on and they win. A comeback win for the Phillies. Dodgers bullpen wasn't able to hold it down. First time in a while that they had a little bit of a blow up, and it was really just one guy, and we'll get to that. All right, Jesus Luzardo, he pitched 5 1/3 innings pitched. He did allow 7 hits, 2 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. All right, Roki Sasaki for 5.1, Alex Vesia for 2/3, Kyle Hurt for 1, Tanner Scott for 1, Blake Trinan for 1. All right, Tanner Scott was the one who allowed the 3 earned runs. I'm going to get to that, but we'll start with Sasaki. All right, a week ago, I talked about a lot of exciting things from Sasaki, particularly with his four-seam fastball, some of the metrics that he has changed on that has kind of improved the numbers overall. And he continued to do that in this start. And this, Sasaki continues to get better and better. And I know that he had the best start of his career 2 weeks ago against the Angels. This might have been the most dominant he has looked as a starter. All right, because he looked a little bit more dominant in this game, obviously a much shorter time, and he did allow an earned run. He allowed 1 earned run against the Angels. The best fastball we've seen from Roki as a starter in the big leagues. All right, 98.5 mile per hour. That was what he averaged in the start, a 1.4 miles per hour increase. All right, so almost a mile and a half up from what he averaged throughout the regular season. 8 whiffs on the fastball. That is a career high. He has really increased the metric on his four-seam fastball, and it's showing in real time. If you watch these last couple starts, you can actually see his fastball does look a little bit better, more electric, more carry, more jump, I should say. It really looks like a less hittable pitch. I'm going to give some underlying metrics, and I'm going to give some pitch data that really backs up what he has done. All right, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, a month ago, what he changed with his splitter. Now he has the 2 different splitter forkball pitches. I talked about a week ago the fastball changes. I'm going to give a little bit more numbers that kind of show what he's done with his fastball that has made him look better. All right, Sasaki continues to get better. All right, this is pretty exciting. So before last week in Milwaukee, Sasaki averaged 16 inches of induced vertical break. So 16 inches of vertical break on the four-seam fastball. And he had 2,192 revolutions per minute on his four-seam fastball, which is just spin rate. All right. 16 inches of vert and 2,192 RPMs on his fastball. All right, the spin rate. In the last 2 starts, all right, against the Brewers and the Phillies, his four-seam fastball. In the last 2 starts against the Brewers and the Phillies, his four-seamer averaged 17 inches of induced vertical break, 2,276 revolutions per minute. So his movement on the fastball has jumped an inch on the vertical break, and then the RPMs have gone up a lot as well. Like I said, 2192 up to 2276. His fastball averaged 13 inches of drop prior to the Milwaukee start. It's averaged 11.5 inches of drop the last 2 starts. And for those of you who might not be aware, the less drop on a four-seam fastball, the better. A lot of times you get used to hearing break and drop when it comes to breaking pitches and stuff like that. So you might think you want more break. But when it comes to four-seam fastballs, the less drop, the better. All right, you want your four-seam fastball to stay on plane as good as possible. That is why I've always talked about Alex Vesia. He is the best fastball in the game at staying on plane. The most induced vertical break, the best vert in the entire sport is Alex Vesia. All right, it doesn't matter that the guy throws 91 miles an hour now. That pitch spins as good as any fastball in the game, and it has the best induced vertical break. It stays on plane, has that carry, that ride. It doesn't drop, all right? When you think about hitting, all right, basically hitting is you're using your eyes to basically predict where the pitch is going to end up, right? When you're up at the plate swinging, you don't necessarily swing at the pitch where it is, at the pitcher's coming out of his hand. You swing where you think the ball is going to end up, right? If you see a breaking ball is starting at you, but you can kind of tell it has that break that's going to come back out over the plate, you obviously start your swing. You are using your eyes to anticipate where the ball will end up. Well, if your four-seam fastball stays on plane and has less drop, that means it is harder for hitters to recognize that pitch. All right, it has more life to it, which means it stays on plane better. It's kind of harder to get on top of that pitch. All right, it basically, sometimes you hear guys say, oh, his fastball's flat. That's basically what this means. All right, so less drop, more induced vertical break, more RPMs means that Sasaki, what does it all mean? For all that kind of fancy talk, the fastball shape is improving. Less drop, staying on plane better, more explosive, less hittable. It just means that the metrics behind his fastball are getting better, and it's overall turning it into a better pitch, because Sasaki, one of his biggest struggles has been his fastball. All right. And if you notice in the start, he threw it a lot. He threw 40% fastballs. He was relying on that pitch a lot, and it looked very, very good. He was able to sneak it by a couple of really good hitters, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper. The fastball looked very, very good. His stuff is starting to look really electric. There's a reason why the Dodgers have, remained confident in Sasaki. And I know, he's been one of the more polarizing guys because him coming over from Japan, obviously, you see a guy who's Japanese in a Dodger uniform, you quickly compare him to Yamamoto, who's a World Series hero, Cy Young candidate, Shohei Ohtani, and you see that Sasaki is not doing good, and so many people think he doesn't deserve to be in the rotation, and he needs to go down to the minor leagues, and the Dodgers have seen from the start that this guy has the makeup and the potential to be very good, and we're watching it in real time right now. We are watching him at the big league level, not down in the minor leagues, not on a rehab assignment or anything like that. We are watching him in real time make changes to his pitch repertoire, make changes to his pitch mix, make changes to his fastball. All right, and it is making him a better pitcher on the spot, on the fly. All right. The other pitches, the secondary pitchers, his splitter has a 171 batting average with a 33.7% whiff rate. His forkball, so the other slower splitter, 242 batting average against 32.3% whiff rate. And one of his weapons have become his slider, a 182 batting average against with a 42.2% whiff rate, 12th highest whiff rate among all sliders. All right, if you watch this game against the Phillies, his slider had a ton of depth and break to it. It looked very, very sharp. He was throwing it first pitch of the at-bat, got a couple strikeouts on it. All right, in the month of May, all right, Roki Sasaki has a 3.18 ERA, and he has a walk rate of just 5.3%. All right, he has completely, I don't want to say put the walk issues behind him because he still will allow walks, but man, a 5.3% walk rate in the month of May. It has been a very long time since we've seen any walk concerns. All right, now you can really see it on the mound, man. If you watch his body language, the confidence, he is not scared. He's attacking the strike zone. And the Dodgers, we are getting close, with these last couple Sasaki starts where we might see a complete 180 with this guy. We might see a complete turnaround where, it wasn't that long ago where a lot of the narratives around Sasaki is at some point he's going to have to go down to the minor leagues and, this guy is just not effective right now. Well, right now, his fastball looks way better. The slider, the splitter forkball combo is very good, and he also has a really, really good slider, and he's put a lot of the command issues behind him. This guy, don't be shocked if we look up in July, August, and this guy has some pretty solid numbers. All right, don't be shocked, because he's getting better and better with every start. And I am more confident than ever that Sasaki is going to be a very good pitcher going forward. And like I said in my last podcast, it might be as early as this year. By the end of this year, we might see Sasaki with very good numbers. His numbers overall still don't look great. He still has a pretty high ERA and doesn't have a great strikeout rate, but he does have a good whiff rate overall. He gets good extension on the mound, and he's got great velocity. As he continues to improve, I think the number is going to look great. The fastball metrics have me excited. All right, less drop on that pitch, the better vert. All right, that makes the fastball look a lot better, and it makes it just makes him overall. It gives him more weapons to go to. And like I've said the last few weeks, I just really appreciate him and the Dodgers not sitting back on their hands, trying to make changes. Obviously, this is a slow burn, and we've always known like Sasaki is a work in progress. But at the same time, man, like get in the lab and like try some things up, like switch some things up. Your fastball is bad. Why is that? You could touch 100 miles an hour, so why would you have a bad fastball? It doesn't mean that it has to be your best pitch, but you really have no excuse to have that pitch getting hit around when you could throw that hard, And they've really switched things up where now he is so much more in the strike zone, all right? He's not way out of the zone with the fork ball that is less predictable and the bad command on the heater. He's really been able to attack a lot of his command issues, and it's been part of the big turnaround that we're starting to see. So great stuff. All right, before we close up on this game too, I hate to say this, all right, and I feel bad, and I'm usually not this kind of guy. The Dodgers only really lost this one game because of one guy, and that's Tanner Scott. Obviously, it's not ultimately his fault. The Dodgers could have done a little bit more with runners in scoring position. I'll get to that in a sec. So it's not Tanner Scott's fault, but I mean, they beat the Phillies game 1, a couple of home runs. They killed them in game 3. We'll get to that. And they were winning game 2. It was really just one bad inning, and it was one guy, Tanner Scott. All right, he just didn't have it in that 8th inning, and he looked a lot like the 2025 version. All right, 3 hits that all came with 2 strikes. That was one of Scott's biggest, just most frustrating things about him last year was like he would get guys to 2 strikes, and he just couldn't put them away. Literally, like the announcers would be talking Joe Davis, Oral Hershiser, and they're like, if you're going to go to the slider here, you got to get it down. If you're going to go to the fastball here, you got to get it up. And he literally would just throw fastballs right down the middle or leave sliders in the heart of the plate. And he did that a lot in this inning. Now, he has been fantastic as of late and really as a whole in 2026. He has an ERA under 2. So I'm not at all going to kill him. It's just a tough loss after Sasaki's performance, and everyone else in the pen really did their job. It was really just Tanner Scott. So again, I'm not going to kill him because he's been great as of late, but next time out, I'm going to be paying attention to that command because he gave up a 2-strike hit to Justin Crawford to start the inning. Then with Bryce Harper, again, 2 strikes. Like, sometimes I don't love Will Smith's pitch calling, like 2 strikes, Bryce Harper at the plate. Like you're really supposed to go slider away. He set up in for a fastball, just left it right down the middle. Then they have the Edmundo Sosa, who's been really good against lefties throughout his career. You get 2 strikes on him, fastball up that Sosa is able to handle. So, again, you can look at it either way and say the Dodgers outplayed the Phillies for however many innings in this series. It was really just that one inning. But the offense overall, like I said, 2 for 11 with runners in scoring positions, 8 runners left on base. Mookie Betts had 3 hits in this game, so that's great. Second 3-hit game of the week. Alex Call had 2 hits. All right, Luzardo and Wheeler are 2 tough pitchers, all right, and they were able to put some runs against them. So you got to take advantage in Game 3. You're taking on Andrew Painter of the Phillies, who is a youngster that hasn't been great this year. So, you get a pass. They didn't put up a ton of runs against Wheeler and Luzardo. They obviously did really good against Wheeler with the 4 home runs, but, I can understand that they didn't necessarily hammer those guys. You got to take advantage of Painter because he hasn't been as good. So let's go ahead and go to Game 3. All right, in the bottom of the second, Alex Freeland, who has gets the start in this game, he doubles to dead center off the center field wall. Max Muncy comes in to score, 1-0 Dodgers. Bottom of the third, Kyle Tucker, we love to see this. He singles into right field, right off the first base bag to make it 2-0 Dodgers. He also had another hit in this game, a double. Ryan Ward, all right, his first big league home run. All right, congrats to him because I know that he has been in the Dodgers minor league system since like 2019. All right, he's going to get a chance with Teoscar Hernandez's injury. Him and Alex Call. I don't know if it'll be a full platoon because Call has been really, really good as of late. But obviously one's left-handed, one's right-handed. Probably will be somewhat of a platoon. But congrats to him because he gets his first big league homer. Alex Freeland, right after that, he homers into right field to make it 4-0 Dodgers. Alex Call, who we just talked about, comes off the bench, single into center field, 6-0 Dodgers. Freddie Freeman hits a sac fly to make it 7-0. Max Muncy is 14th home run of the year, second of the series, makes it 8-0 Dodgers. Another sac fly from Freddie Freeman would make it 9-0. Bryson Stott would hit a home run in the ninth inning to make it 9-1, and the Dodgers win by a score of 9-1. They end the series win over the Phillies, and they have looking really, really good. They have won 14 of their last 17. Like I said, all right, Yamamoto goes 5.1, Will Klein for 2/3, Edgardo Henriquez for 1, and then Jonathan Hernandez pitches two innings. And like I said, he's got some pretty good stuff, but he gave up the one home run, earned run to Bryson Stott. Let's get to Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who looked really, really good in this game. All right, let me give you his final line. He goes 5.1, 4 hits, 0 earned runs, 2 walks. He had 10 strikeouts in this game. All right, Yamamoto, 21 whiffs. All right, so Yamamoto has kind of had this trend as of late where he has a start where he piles up the whiffs and some strikeouts, and then he'll have a start where he doesn't necessarily get as many whiffs like a week ago in Milwaukee. He didn't have a ton of whiffs, only had like 3 strikeouts, but was able to pitch pretty deep into the game thanks to some ground balls, which we've been needing. Well, this start, he only goes 5.1. He didn't have the best of command early on in this game, so that kind of rode his pitch count up there, where when he got through the 5th inning, he had like 90-something pitches, did go back out for the 6th inning, but was only able to get the 1 out. And then Will Klein, I think it was, I believe who it was, that came in, and Yamamoto was able to have no earned runs allowed. But regardless of him not going deep, he was able to bring the strikeouts, like I said, a season-high 10 strikeouts. That actually ties his career high. He's had 10 strikeouts a lot, never gotten over the 10 strikeout mark. And then the 21 whiffs is the second most he's had this season. All right? And again, just like Sasaki and Wrobleski, 10 whiffs on his four-seam fastball in this game. That's a career high. The Phillies, just, again, for whatever reason, they got dominated by four-seam fastballs. Wrobleski had 13, Sasaki had 8, and then Yamamoto had 10. And I looked up the numbers because I was like, well, maybe the Phillies are just oddly a bad team against fastballs. They weren't. They had the 11th highest OPS in Major League Baseball as a team against four-seam fastballs. So whatever reason, Dodgers four-seamers absolutely cooked the Phillies in this series. All right. And like I said, 21 whiffs is the second most he's had overall in one game this year. Just like Wrobleski and Sasaki, all three of these guys increased the velo on their four-seamers in this game, or in their starts. 95.7 on the year for Yamamoto. It was up to 96.7. All right, touching 97, 98 multiple times in this game. Like I said, if he was a little bit more efficient earlier in the game, this probably would have been one of his more dominant games. But he lowers his ERA to 2.89. He's the Dodgers' ace for a reason. Even though early on this year he hasn't been as dominant as he was last year, he still now has a sub-3 ERA. Wouldn't be shocked to see him go to the All-Star game again. And, the National League Cy Young race is loaded right now, so I don't think he'll really get into the race because of the way because of the way Christopher Sanchez, Jacob Mizorowski, Ohtani, and a couple other guys, Chris Sale, Kyle Harrison, a couple of these guys have pitched. Yamamoto would have to be really, really good to get into the race with those guys. I wouldn't put it past him because of how good he is. I think I picked Yamamoto to finish top 3 in Cy Young this year. So he's gotten better and better as the season has gone on, and he's continued to add to the strikeout totals. I think he has 69 innings pitched, 69 strikeouts. Nice. So Yamamoto was great. He brought the swing and miss. You love to see that, especially against a pretty good Phillies team. The bottom of the order was great. Once again, the Dodgers have had the best bottom of the order in Major League Baseball all year. Alex Freeland, 2 extra base hits and including a home run. That's great. Ryan Ward, first big league home run like we talked about. Pretty sick. Alex Call. All right, he was really good this first series since Teoscar Hernandez went down. I just wanted to give Call some credit. 305 batting average on the year with a 417 on base. 417 is monstrous. All right, I think that's a better on base than Ohtani, who has one of the best in the National League. 390 on slugging percentage and an 807 OPS. He's got one of the best eyes in the game. Doesn't chase. If you look at his chase rate, if he qualified, it would be like top 5 in the game. All right, he makes a lot of contact, doesn't strike out. Great walk rate, great eye at the plate, like I said. Doesn't have a ton of pop, doesn't even have a home run this year. But a great bench guy and a great guy that you can have step into the left field role with Teoscar going down. All right. And then also Tucker, Muncy, Ohtani all had 2 hits, including a double from Tucker and a home run from Muncy. All right. So that wraps up the series. Dodgers take 2 out of 3 from a pretty good Phillies team. Now we can look ahead. All right. The month of May is now officially done. All right. We look ahead to June. All right. June swoon. Hopefully the Dodgers don't have a June swoon. But we look ahead to June. The Dodgers, like I said, they've won 14 of their last 17. They go 18-10 in the month of May. All right, pretty good. They didn't start off the month of May pretty hot. I think they lost a series in St. Louis, split with the Giants, I think it was. But then after that, really looking ahead, I think they've won 5 series in a row dating back to the Braves series. So they looked really, really good for the most part in the month of May. All right. So the guys who hit in May and the guys who didn't hit. All right. And I'm not really including the pitching here because if you look up and down the pitching, the bullpen was amazing. Rotation was great. There wasn't really any guys who struggled. So on the offensive side, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez, Shohei Ohtani, Andy Paz, kind of Kyle Tucker. I'll get into that in a sec. The guys who were cold in May, Dalton Rushing, Miguel Rojas, Hae-Sung Kim, who we know got options, Santiago Espinal, Mookie Betts, Max Muncy was a little slow, and then Kyle Tucker, like I said, was kind of a little bit of both. All right. So the numbers that I have don't include today's game. So these numbers are slightly different. But in the month of May, Freddie Freeman, a 944 OPS. He was great. Shohei, an 896 OPS. All right. He's really turned a lot of his struggles around and a lot of the worries about him. Teoscar was great, an 882 OPS. That's why it sucked to see him get injured. Andy Paz, who's just been great overall for the Dodgers this year, 868 in the month of May. After that, though, Will Smith, a 757 OPS, which is solid, but you want to see more. Alex Call, all right, he had an 856. Kyle Tucker, all right, this is one of the more interesting ones, 742. That would go up a tad after today's game where he had 2 hits and an extra base hit. Tucker, for a lot of May, was one of the better Dodger hitters. He had an OPS close to 900 for a lot of May. But then the last 2 weeks, basically outside of a couple hits in Milwaukee, he went really, really cold, and those completely tanked his numbers to where he has an OPS, like I said, of 742. All right, the guys who struggled. Dalton Rushing has not done anything since that really hot start. Miguel Rojas, an OPS of 440. Hae-Sung Kim, that's what basically got him sent down. And then we know Mookie Betts, 657. All right, so those are the guys who were really great. It was really exciting to see, obviously, Ohtani, because there weren't really many worries about him, but we do know that he was struggling. And then Freddie Freeman, because of Freddie Freeman's age, anytime you see a little bit of extended time where he's cold, you start to question, is this the beginning of the fall-off? Freddie put most of that to bed for me. We got to see him continue it these next couple months because we know last year, like I've talked about, June and July were one of the worst months for him offensively in his career. So he's got to be able to continue to prove it in this upcoming June. But, his OPS is over 800. Same thing with Shohei. Same thing with Paez. Max Muncy, I know he was cold in the month of May a little bit, but he still has an OPS close to 900 because of how hot he started. All right. Now, in the month of June, I got 2 guys that are absolute musts to see them turn it around and to really play good. All right, I want to see these 2 guys at the top of the leaderboards in the month of June like Freddie and Shohei. And that, of course, is Mookie Betts and Kyle Tucker. Okay. Tucker is very interesting, like I said, because he, for the most part, actually wasn't that bad in the month of May. He just fell off the last couple weeks, and overall, I'll give you a preview. My Baseball Mondays podcast will come out tomorrow, and I'm going to talk a lot about, because we're 2+ months into the season, talk about big surprises in baseball, big disappointments. One of the disappointments is Kyle Tucker. All right. I'm not a guy who generally kills a ton of players. I know how hard the sport of baseball is, and I know it's not a lack of effort. It's not for a lack of effort, but, at the end of the day, this is the world we live in. Kyle Tucker is the highest paid player in the game. And basically being a slightly above league average hitter is not going to cut it. All right. And Tucker, he only has 4 home runs, and we're going to be in June. 4 homers. How many home runs is he on pace to hit? Is he even going to hit 15 home runs? Is he going to hit 20 home runs? I still think he's going to turn it around. I still think there's a lot of season left for both him and Mookie to have good seasons, especially Tucker. I'm still very confident Tucker is going to have a pretty solid season. Mookie is the one that is kind of up in the air because of what he did last year. But regardless, I believe in both of those guys. I've talked about it for like 3 weeks now about Mookie's underlying metrics, and I've talked about all season how I believe in Tucker. Those guys got to prove it in the month of June. All right, it's still like early in the season that you can't kill them and say like you can't label their seasons as like these have been bad seasons. But to this point, we've played more than a quarter of the season. They have been bad starts, and those guys are at the top of the list of guys that you got to see improve. All right, I don't want to see these mid at bats from Kyle Tucker, like these ground outs to first base and second base. I want to see more hard contact. Today he was able to get a little bit of luck. Lined out in the first inning, hit a ball 100 miles an hour off the bat. Then he was able to hit a soft ground ball to first base that hit off the bag. Then he was able to rip a double. All right, Mookie Betts had 2-3 hit games this week. All right, hit a couple home runs. Those guys need to look to start to get hot, and it starts in Arizona this week, a ballpark where the ball flies. Mookie Betts, I think, has pretty good numbers there in his career. I can think of a lot of home runs that he's hit in Arizona in a Dodger uniform. I know last year Kyle Tucker hit a couple home runs there with the Cubs, so those guys need to get off to a good start in June to really start this turnaround. So that's all I have for you guys. Dodgers look pretty good right now, I'll be honest. They've won 14 of their last 17, like I've said a couple times. So month of June, we're getting into the summertime. It's officially summertime, and hopefully we can get a Dodgers summer. Dodgers generally over the years play some of their best baseball in the summer. Hasn't been that much the case the last couple years. Last year they weren't really that great in the summer, and the year before that, like, they weren't amazing. That was really a thing of the past, like 2017, 2019, 2021, 2022, where they just like went off in the months of June, July, August. So we'll see, man. Thank you guys so much for listening. Episode 101 of Talking Blue. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can watch on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow our social media on TikTok, Instagram, and X, and you can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X. Dodgers will play the Diamondbacks in Arizona for 4. We'll see you guys soon. Have a good night, everybody.